Well, welcome to Conversations at the Crossroads. This is Dr. Taku Mhonyera having another amazing interview with a man who carries a story that I believe is necessary and needed, particularly at the time that we're in. I think our country is at a crossroads in terms of substances, drugs, alcohol, the whole works. Right. And we need to have these conversations at the crossroads. So I want to welcome Mr. Taku. Taku, welcome back. It's good to have you back in studio.
Thanks, Dr. Taku.
Yeah.
Definitely grateful to be back in studio for a second installment.
The second installment it is. I hope you've had an opportunity to catch the first one, which is on our YouTube channel, which is Crossroads. Right there, please go to that channel, like it, subscribe to it, follow, give us comments, give us feedback. Let us know how we can help you on the journey to freedom, breaking free from the substance abuse. Now, Taku is a man who has an amazing story, part of which we shared in the last episode. And in episode 2, we want to really tackle a very intense conversation that has been triggered again by the second announcement of no alcohol in the shops. And that's really creating a crisis for many people. Tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll get into a couple of questions that we have.
Cool. So the president announced on Sunday a reversion back to the no alcohol policy, so which in other words is prohibition. Prior to that, the last time he had spoken, I think he had touched on this idea of saying, ever since they had opened up the liquor stores, there had been an increase in gender-based violence, people ending up in hospitals, and the trauma load. So it was already something that was in play to say, look, how do we balance this thing out? Because once we've open these gates, seemingly this thing just comes into play. So I'd assume part of the reason why he ended up putting it back on the shelf medically, I think what they was experiencing in the hospitals at the moment is the trauma load, which just means that the people coming into hospitals, and there were a lot of them now coming because of alcohol related trauma, which then possibly puts the whole thing, in jeopardy, because you're trying to help someone with COVID or something else, and you also have to now come deal with someone who says they had a car accident because they were drunk or dead, been drinking irresponsibly or otherwise, and you're trying to figure out.
So there is a real problem in terms of the number of people coming into hospitals for whether an accident, drunk driving, or they had a brawl at the nightclub and they were drunk, or domestic violence.
Yeah, or even just like in the bathtub, you had been drinking and then you slip in the bathtub and you crack your head open. So, obviously alcohol, it will change your perspective in terms of distance measuring and all those type of things, and anything can happen to that extent. So, yeah, certain things like that can happen, and once again, you go to a hospital, and now they have that triage. So who do you help first?
Yeah. So
obviously the guy was coming in, they're bleeding and all this kind of stuff. There's a usual tendency to then try and rush and help that person. But what they were now saying was like, well, a lot of that was coming as a result of drinking related.
So the best option is let's stop the drinking.
Well, it's one of those options where you have to now take it into account and say, let's look at the stats. When we stopped, this was what we had. So prior to lockdown, I think they were saying it was about 17,000 cases a week.
Whoa.
So this is before lockdowns, and it was generally 17,000 cases of trauma. Okay. When they a week.
Oh my goodness.
A week. Okay.
Okay.
So this is nationwide.
Yeah.
And then when they put the ban in place, that number reduced to about 6,500.
Okay.
And now that they opened it up, it has risen to about 11,500.
Okay.
So there's some correlation definitely that they're looking at and saying, what do we do, especially in the pandemic situation?
Yeah.
It's too risky right now.
So now it's an issue of we've got to prioritize. This is something that we know we can manage. But that then brings out, I think, a number of conversations that you said you had, different radio stations. People are calling you to ask some key questions about what happens to Mr. X, who needs the alcohol, if I can put it that way.
Right. So then you have the far extreme where this causes panic. Okay, so if someone is an alcoholic on this extreme side, stops drinking abruptly, it can be fatal.
Fatal as in
You
they
can
die.
Yeah, literally.
Okay.
If you try go cold turkey, depending on your conditions and all this kind of stuff like that, it can get to a point where what is called alcohol withdrawal syndrome. It can be fatal. You can suffer seizures. You can have what's called delirium tremens, where you end up hallucinating and feeling like things are crawling on you. So it can. I mean, obviously that's on the extreme side of it, but that's the reality. Someone can actually die. So anytime we ever admit someone into treatment, the first thing is always to do is check them physically.
Okay.
Okay. So get them to a doctor. The doctor will check them out. Then, as a result of what the doctor sees or feels, he'll prescribe a detox.
Okay.
Okay. So that it reduces the risk of traumas, of seizures, and of dying or anything of those type of things. But yeah, it can happen. Someone can actually end up in that situation.
Wow.
Most withdrawals, what people experience is what I think most of people have experienced is a hangover. Okay. So alcohol suppresses the nervous system. So when it's no longer there, the heart rate begins to pick up. You might feel sweaty, nausea, and all those type of things, and that's pretty much most people. So even like when I went,
that's what they call a hangover.
Yeah.
Okay. No. Forgive me. I've never had a drink. I've never gotten drunk. So except on the Holy Ghost. But
cool.
So some of the terms are quite interesting. So we're here at Conversations at the Crossroads with Taku, an expert and one who's running Crossroads, which is a detox center, a rehab center, where if you need help, the details are on the screen right there. Please get in touch with us. Your family member, relative, son, daughter is going through some kind of withdrawal, some kind of traumatic experience because alcohol is no longer available, etc., etc. But you want them to be free. You want them to break out. Taku's story is he was addicted. He was in that space. If you watch the first episode that we did, he was in a place where he was, been to a hospital many times, been to jail, been through all kinds of really, really traumatic situations up until he decided, I've got to confront this. So there is hope that you can be free. So talking about the people that are going through the process, now I can't buy it, and I didn't have an opportunity to buy a 6-pack for an emergency. What's going to happen? What do you see?
Okay, so once again, so as you're dealing with this whole thing, there's the physical aspect, and then I think what's more long-term is the psychological, emotional aspect of it. So at least once you get to a doctor and they can, safely help you get through a detoxifying process, which might last a couple of days. What was quite interesting was noticing it like with my wife when the president announced that she doesn't really drink at all, but it was amazing like how the idea of her not being able to have a drink or be able to go get a drink. I was watching this and I was like, wow, okay. And she was like, oh my God, this whole thing has happened and, I hadn't stocked up and all this kind of stuff. And she's not someone who's on, as I said, that spectrum. Like she's not on that far end of the spectrum. She's pretty much on that side.
So just the fact that it's no longer available, it's like...
Yes. Right, okay. That at some point in time, there's an imagined state that she may enter into that she's associated with a nice glass of wine would just be okay in that experience. That's been removed off the table, and that causes the kind of mild panic. So even you see what they do with cigarettes. Right on the box it says "Danger, smoking kills." So what does that do to you? What does that do to you? Right? I don't want to die. It causes a little panic.
Yeah,
and that's what they want you to do because they want you to then associate panic with relief.
Whoa.
So if you don't have any other coping mechanism, you panic a little bit, then you're like,
come on. You got to hear this again. Please explain.
Right.
That psychological impact. The words on the packet.
Yes, which
create a panic.
Because you wouldn't want to die of cancer.
Yeah.
Right. You don't want lung cancer. You don't want all of those type of consequences.
Yes.
So you look at this, and that's why most people don't even want to look at it. Because that's what it's supposed to kind of like. You should be wary around this thing. This thing is poisonous, all this kind of stuff. But what it actually does is it creates a little bit of panic, and they know that you associate panic and then relief with the cigarette. So instantly you then have
And a couple of years ago, I was in China. I was in Hong Kong, and Hong Kong has a very strong law in terms of the announcement. Every packet has got a picture of cancer.
Right.
Every cigarette packet has got a picture of cancer. And I mean, the goriest pictures you ever see.
Right.
But China and Hong Kong are the leading tobacco buyers globally.
Right.
So they still have the highest marketing in terms of scaring people, but the highest consumption. It didn't make sense. Now you're saying this, it's actually now beginning to really show me that people's emotional and their reaction to the announcement is to pursue this thing as a consolation or as a way of saying, at least I'm safe, I'm protecting myself.
Right.
Amazing.
So, I mean, look, anyone would probably put a premium on peace of mind.
Mm-hmm.
And however you associate relief, release, peace of mind.
Yeah.
If that becomes your strategy to say, when I feel uncomfortable, I know if I have a couple of drinks, I feel okay. Mm-hmm. And that's now played out as a neural pathway that now just understands, oh, okay, cool. You're feeling a bit uncomfortable. We know exactly what to do. Now it becomes the knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah.
So the psychological impact now says, oh, we definitely know at some point in time we're going to feel uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. Something, i.e., our president could just say, fellow South Africans, we're going to level 5. Anything can happen.
Yeah.
So now that's taken off and you don't have your coping mechanism.
Yeah.
Then you're now in that feeling of overwhelm. Mm-hmm. Okay. So a lot of it is going to be obviously the psychological impact of what that statement means, for various people. And once again, for an alcoholic, it's just now says, okay, but I'm still going to have to drink. Mm-hmm. And where you move from possibly the psychological impact of that is the behavioral. Mm-hmm. So what do you do now? Mm-hmm. And as with prohibition, black market instantly. So you can imagine today
the price
that's gone up. Okay.
Sure.
So now there's this huge incentive that's now available for people to now be distributing at these premium prices. Mm-hmm. So that's what's going to probably be happening. It's like people are going to start calling their dealers, right? And be like, hey, listen, because prior to the lockdown, dealers had now come up. Then they went out of business because it went back. So every time you have prohibition, whilst you're trying to do the right thing, which is similarly what I was talking about, the cigarette, they probably thought they were doing the right thing. Yeah. But they didn't understand the side effect of it. Or, of course, they probably understood the side effect.
They wanted to make money.
Right. So, how these things can work out. Yeah. So the idea now is possibly prohibition is coming. So you now call back the dealer from before. Hey, listen, do you have anything? You're calling around trying to find people who have supply and all this kind of stuff like that. So that becomes the behavioral aspect of it, is that people go back to the black market. The other thing of that is, and I remember this also happened to me because one of the times I'd had pancreatitis. Mm-hmm. We'll talk about that as well. Do not try this at home. It is painful. It's like being in labor for a week. And I'm sitting there, I'm talking to the doctor. The doctor says, listen, no drinking. I'm like, no way I'm going to drink ever again. So I started using drugs. Mm-hmm. Okay. So the other behavioral aspect you might find is when you prohibit alcohol, people then look for alternatives.
So this is a Pandora's box.
Yeah, it is. It just keeps on unpacking itself. And funny thing is, drugs are possibly not going to be cheaper than the alcohol because drugs have always been black market, so the prices don't really fluctuate. Mm-hmm. Now alcohol just goes way up there, and you're trying to figure it. And drugs are pretty much whatever.
So your only relief now is drugs, which will be more available. The numbers are there. The people are on the street corners.
They've always been. They've been doing this game for longer than the alcohol guy per se. So you might find that people will probably try to smoke some weed or.
That's a okay. So from a rehab perspective, what's been happening at your rehabs that you're running in terms of has the clientele changed? Have you seen an increase? Have you gotten more phone calls? What's happening right now?
So for us, when the prohibition came in, the numbers kind of dropped. And part of that, I think, is possibly the reason why is people aren't hitting that rock bottom state. So when you're in a home and you can connect possibly with family or otherwise, and there's that containment, and possibly, to that extent, you don't feel so much the need to then go out and do all these type of things, or you're limited in being able to go out. Then it gets lifted, and then obviously people start moving around, and people have car accidents, and then people are like, hey, listen, this guy really has a serious problem. We thought things were good because maybe for a month or two, because this is the thing around these things, is you can do things in the short term, but in the long run, you know, like myself, I could do 3 months sober at given points in time, but after a given point in time, I'd go back, and then it'll start to spiral out again. So you will find, the dips be happening and saying, when there was prohibition, that kind of stops for a little while, and then you open it up, and then you start finding, and then other people, even whilst lockdown and everything, you can see they didn't stop drinking, they didn't stop using drugs. They were, I mean, I saw one where the guys had they were delivering with a what do you call these things?
Drone.
Yeah, with a drone. Right. So there's this drone, and they would deliver. So people become more creative around how to.
That is next level.
It's like, I'll send it to you, and then this drone comes through, and the guys pick it up, and it was. So people become more creative when you try to stop.
Yeah. When
you try to stop the supply without addressing the demand. Okay. So you can do whatever you want with the supply, but at a certain point in time, there has to be a point where you look at why is there people are trying to keep numb, keep dissociating from reality. And if you don't address that, you can stop the supply.
Let's talk about the psychological element in terms of what goes on in the mind of a person, either addicted to substances, drugs, or alcohol. Now, okay, I don't have this stuff. What happens to relationships? What happens between husband and wife, parents and children? What's the impact of that on the family unit and on people?
Well, you find people, even when it's not something like alcohol, and at that level, coffee for a lot of people. Yeah. That morning coffee. If certain people don't have that morning coffee,
they're grumpy the whole day, banging the door.
Yeah. So sometimes that's when you actually see. It's not so much when people have the alcohol, it's when they don't have it. That's when you also can see that it's that irritable restlessness. Yeah. Discontentedness is what we like to call it per se. If you don't have that, it's you go. Can I just have my first cup of coffee? After that, you can see, okay, hello, how are you? You can see the difference. Like, okay, cool. Without that, then one way. It's
amazing.
But once the caffeine hits the system and the associations, so a lot of it is not so much the chemical part of it; it's the associations, it's the psychology behind it that really is driving a lot of this kind of stuff like that. So, as I like to say, to some extent, we're not really addicted to substances. We're addicted to ideas.
Whoa, okay.
And whenever you create a fantasy, you will encounter its hell. And when you encounter the hell, you're going to need the relief. Okay. So let's say I'm addicted to this idea of I'm entitled. Things should just come to me without me putting in the work and all this kind of stuff like that. But reality does not support that. It says, no, you need to do something. And provide and partake in all that kind of stuff. And therefore, when I'm addicted to this idea of entitlement, I'm going to meet the hell that comes as well. It says, well, you have your debt to reality to pay. And when it comes like, oh, that's really hard, and then I'm going to need relief. Okay. So you find people have addicted to the idea of I can't live with somebody.
Yeah.
To the extent that it's so strong that if this person, something was to happen to the person, they're like, I'd rather die. Okay. And if you're working along that kind of software, you're going to encounter the hell of them leaving and you stuck.
And you're stuck, yeah.
And now you're like, how do I cope? So at least something that you can rely on is I'll drink. Okay. So there's that kind of correlation because, as I said, once I got to rehab, I did my detox a couple of days. There was never anything really about the drinking. There wasn't something like, I missed this drink, I'm really hooked on it. That was just mental. Most of it was really, just this idea of saying, I don't know how to live, and I'm stuck on this idea that, somehow I should be entitled to a life and all this kind of stuff. And I had to grow out of those things. And once I grew out of those things, there was less need for me to then rely on that. So that's what I was speaking about, this sense of disconnectedness and dislocation.
So in rehab, there's the process of the detox, me getting free from the substance.
Yeah.
What happens from a psychological perspective? What's the process What can a person do in order to, I don't know what word, maybe still use the word rehabilitate my relationships and my ability to deal with people minus the substance?
Cool. So the first thing is, yeah, whenever someone's coping mechanism is removed from them, that's part of the reason why there's so much fear.
Mm-hmm.
Is I've been so reliant upon this strategy.
Mm-hmm.
It's now being removed. How do I start something new?
Uh-huh.
So a lot of people right now, your job might be made redundant as a result of what's going on now, and you want to feel the panic of saying, I've invested so many years in doing this line of work. What do I do now?
Yeah.
I went to school, did what they told me to do. I got my degree. Everything I did it by the play. Yeah. Exactly as it. But now here it is. You're being told, listen, sorry, we're closing down the company.
Yeah.
Then the fear now comes to say, I've gone so far down this way. How do I go?
How do I go back?
Anyway,
how do I look for an alternative?
Yeah. This game is now over.
Yeah.
All I knew was to play soccer. It's like, your leg is broken. So what do you do? Mm-hmm. So we need to learn how to adapt. And in that adaptation process, some people can. Some people, the fear will just paralyze them. And they stay stuck. And if you stay stuck there, that's where, once again, if you don't have something to really live for, that's where addiction really likes to then take strife, because it becomes the alternative. Instead of living a life with, or living and building and having purpose with, you're just trying to tap out of that zone.
What can family members do? If I have an uncle, a brother, a husband who's going through this whole process, what would be the best kind of support from an emotional, physical, psychological perspective? What are some of the things that I can do practically to help them not feel the absence of their escape route of going this way? What are there things that I can do in order to create an environment that is conducive for them to rediscover themselves, rediscover purpose, and come out from where they are?
Yeah, so I think it's like a dance, and it's an imperfect type of dance, because some of the things you'll experience as a result of someone's addiction, it's not easy to love. It's not easy to love whilst everything is like set up like this for your purpose. Yeah. And you come home and one of the kids is taking the camera and the whatnot, where you understand how important this is for, in terms of production and broadcasting and the message that you carry. And it's gone. And you can be a saint all you want, but there's a certain point in time you'll be, you're hurt, you're angry, and you're responding to those type of experiences. So it's such an imperfect balance of, forgiveness, love, detachment.
Okay.
Loving, but at a detached place. To say, look, I love you as a child, I love you as but obviously that type of behavior I can't accept.
Okay.
So it might come to putting down some sort of boundaries and say, I will not give you pocket money.
Yeah.
Because you understand that pretty much what you're doing is you're the one funding the continued drug usage or otherwise. So you might put that as a boundary for yourself and just say, I'm not. You can live here as much as you want, but if I test you and I find you to be using and you're lying about it, then we can't live together. So you kind of, and because this thing progresses, so whatever you used to do before might not necessarily be what you do later on.
Okay. So tell me, I want to ask a very hot question right now. We bring Taku in and we have a meeting, round table.
Right.
We've got the president, we have the Minister of Health, and I don't know who else, the head of the judiciary, maybe Chief Justice is there, all the decision makers that would help us make the right decisions in terms of the way forward as a nation. Because, I know the stats, I've seen a couple of the stats in terms of alcohol abuse and drug abuse, in schools, all the way up into the corporate and into all kinds of different, the music industry, the arts, the amount of substance abuse, etc. What would you say as recommendations as a way forward for the country? Is there hope for a country to break free from this unending cycle of abuse, depression, psychological issues, domestic violence, etc., etc.?
That's a good question. And, I think at any given rate, it's multifaceted.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing I just wanted, and especially in line with current situation at the hospitals with the medical fraternity. As I said, I've been to hospital about 4 times. Written off the car, twice acute pancreatitis, and another time, yeah, I'd been in jail and came out and like almost like smallpox almost. I think it was just the lice and all the infested stuff like it just didn't do too well with me. The one thing, as I said, is I never asked the doctor to say, Doc, I get it. This is obviously a problem. I get that. You get that. We're both sitting here. We both get that. And as I said, I never asked the doctor to say how. And the doctor also never asked me and said, listen, do you need to do something different? One of the things, unfortunately, is you're going to experience with people with substance abuse. We tend to minimize our usage. So when the doctor also maybe asks me and says, how often do you drink? We minimize, no, just 2. Okay. So possibly that's part of the reason why they also don't then say, hey, maybe let's look at this as an issue, because we're not so forthcoming with telling the truth. Once again, subconsciously somewhere along the line, I fear this idea of my supply being removed. And I know if I tell him the truth, that's where he's going to start trying to get into. So the one thing, unfortunately, is, we minimize, so we don't tell the whole truth. So possibly, the second time I went into hospital with acute pancreatitis, so it's an 18-month split. I got there, and I'm telling the people, I'm like, listen, I need pethidine, I need this, I'm vomiting bile and all this kind of stuff. So, they're like, how do you know these things? Like, I've done this before. And they're like, oh, repeat offender. And you can see already that there was already that sense of saying, this is as a result of, they talk about responsible drinking. Yeah. There's also responsible living. My consequence was I was not responsible living, and that's why I ended up in that situation. Because
I've always wondered how you can marry the 2 words responsible and drinking together. It's an oxymoron. But anyway, continue.
Right. So I'm back at it again, and there was just never this conversation to say, maybe you can't fix this by yourself. As I was saying, if anything was to happen, let's say in here and I fell off and I broke my leg, there'll be the ambulance would come, first responders, they'll put me there, and their job is to take me to the hospital. Then there'll be some doctor possibly who would, fix my leg, put it back into place and all this, right? Yeah. And that will be their portion. And then there'll be the portion where I now go to the physiotherapist, who then helps me then to do all these type of things. Yeah. So that's why I said it's a multifaceted place. So the doctor, yes, they could help me with the acute pancreatitis and so forth. But then the long term was saying, hey, listen, maybe you need something more than just coming to hospital each time and, taking up space here. Maybe that could have opened a conversation to say, do you have an issue? Or maybe try this number if you ever think that you can't stop this by yourself. Okay. So that's one of the things I wanted to put out there for the medical fraternity, at least. Let's have that conversation with people. You're talking about, 17,000 pre-lockdown. Where did all those people go afterwards?
Sure, yeah. Okay. Good question.
Some of them left there, thought that they could then fix this, thought that experience would be enough for them to change. And out of those 17,000, some of them continued drinking and continued suffering consequences and whatever else happened. But maybe they never got to understand that, hey, listen, this might be bigger than just your consequence. You might actually need some help to be able to then address the underlying issue, which keeps you ending up in a position where, all things considered, a drink is better than not drinking. So that's what I'm speaking to as a medical fraternity. Okay, contact us. We'll gladly come and we'll help you guys with that process. As we said, unfortunately, for many of us, we're going to minimize because we're so afraid of this idea of saying we might have to do things differently, and we can't imagine an alternative that is viable. So once again, I was laughing with my partner, and you're saying he's got a little daughter that recently he's just got with this woman, and he says it's amazing. She likes to play with her phone a lot, and if I take away her phone, I then realize I have to now engage with her. So the easiest thing is, if I don't want to engage her, is to give her the phone.
Whoa, gotcha.
So now the government says, we'll take away your drink, but you'll have to deal with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So to the government, then I'd say, yes, you can take away the supply, but we still need to address, to say,
the real problems.
what is it? Yes.
Yeah.
Underneath that keeps people feeling so disconnected from life, that keeps them feeling like, we're just in this rat race, and there's no real meaning in what we're doing. It's just, cashing checks, and at any given point in time, this all can end. So once again, also, it's like the common thing to do with addiction currently is to criminalize it, for better and for worse. But obviously, once someone is criminalized, the opportunity for them to then be able to get a job, to be able to move from there, diminishes.
And that worsens.
And then that worsens your predicament.
Yeah.
Once again, you're in this place where it's like, well, I'm hopeless anyway. I might as well just tap out of life because there's nothing there for me. So possibly, it's to look at different types of. I know they in Portugal they've tried different things, and apparently for them what they do is, there has to be some level of treatment offered for the person, and then if they also go through that treatment process, they give tax incentives for people who then hire people who've gone through that process. So then at least it's like, okay, there's some hope.
There's some hope, yeah.
Because I think for a lot of us, that's where the problem is and once again, addiction is so tied in with despair. If I can't imagine a hopeful life, my tendency is then to dissociate and disconnect from it. Like, I'm disqualified from it, so why should I even engage in it? So those are some of the type of things, is to look at, yes, other countries who've also looked at how do we address this. Because currently, at greatest level is just to criminalize.
Okay, gotcha. There's a couple of interesting nuggets there, and remember, this is Conversations at the Crossroads, and this is Dr. Titch, and we have Taku here, who's an expert in rehabilitation, and going the journey himself is able to take others along on the journey as well. In closing, I'd like to ask an interesting question. Is there an outstanding story that you can bring to us of somebody else that you've taken through the rehab process, and you can look at their life and say, look at that, would like to write a book about that person and tell the world the story that it is possible to be in this mess and be totally turned around, kind of like chalk to cheese, a total transformation. Tell us one story, one or two stories. I want to just hear, because people out there are actually asking that question. Is it possible for me to totally change? Maybe they're saying Taku is a special case, that he's just extraordinary, that he was there, and maybe the prison story and all that happened in prison was sufficient to really motivate him to change. But I've never been to prison. Is there a way for me to really change without having hit that rock bottom prison sentence kind of situation?
Okay. So there was a couple years ago, some man comes in, he's about 71 years old. And instantly I'm like, guys,
you're 71. Just let him drink.
Let him drink. Let him ride it out, man. Don't bother the elderly. And it's quite amazing just how, when you think to yourself, and like, if I was 71, it's too late. And also, what's been also strange is, I always think if I was 18, and when I was 18, you couldn't tell me anything.
Yeah.
And it's amazing when don't see the 18-year-old and he shifted up, and it's like, okay. So
the 18-year-old and the 71-year-old.
Where is it more difficult? 18, you're too young. 71, you're too old. Just don't know.
Yeah.
His wife was just fed up with him, and he wasn't. It wasn't like he was driving around and crashing cars or having affairs and anything like that. He just wasn't living, pretty much.
Yeah.
That was what he just wake up, he drink, doesn't connect, doesn't know. So his wife comes in and she's like, no, he needs to get better. And she's very adamant about this. So he's there, and then actually ends up staying for the second month. His wife was like, you better stay for a second month, and she was just,
so it was a thorough cleanup.
It's like, not tolerating the stubbornness of yours, you better change. So he left, and I wouldn't have had any hope. I was like, what else is he gonna do? Go home with a wife like that, who's probably just drink. But about a year and a half later, here he comes, with his wife, and they're hand in hand, and almost like galloping, almost like
Oh my goodness.
he had energy for like a 30-year-old, smile ear to ear, with his bought us some biltong and all this kind of stuff. And he says to us, he's like, I want to thank you guys for what you guys did.
Wow.
This has been like the best year and a half with my wife, and his wife is there, and they're brimming. And I was taken back, and I realized
this is amazing.
Yeah, and that's when I realized. I said, you see, for me, what I thought was write it out for your last 2 years, but the other side of that was this could be the best 2 years he had ever had with his wife.
Wow.
And that was worthwhile for him. The grandkids could come over, hang out with granddad. He could participate and connect with them at all that level. And that's when I just realized, I said, yeah, you see, this is when my mind just doesn't see the bigger picture and see how worthwhile that journey was for him, to see him come back and just be like, yeah, when I'm 71, I still want the best 71 years of my life. That could be my best year. I want that to be my best year, and spend it with my family and my wife in that life. So yeah, the cool thing about it is, as always, is when you have the opportunity to watch people's lights go on, it beats any high.
Yeah,
that's what the addiction is trying to stop you from, is to experience that true level of connectivity, that true level of being intimate with another human being, and to connect and to just have all of that. And addiction deprives us of that.
Wow. So the real big question here is, are you really ready to have the best year of your life, your best year of your marriage, your family time, your investment, your career? Are you ready to really face the reality of enjoying life and really living without the facade or the hidden face of the substance abuse, the alcohol? Are you ready to truly break out? The truth is, there is a way out. There